Hi everyone, you're watching Eagle News. I'm David Oria in Washington. It's Saturday, March 16, 2024, here in the nation's capital. The week's recap begins with United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres saying that women and girls are being hit hard during these turbulent times and suffering the most from wars waged by men. Rosel Feria reports.
Addressing the Commission on the Status of Women, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the increasing conflict and crisis around the world have a devastating impact on women and girls. He mentions the appalling and outrageous conflict continuing in Gaza. The horrific accounts of sexual violence against and sexualized torture of women and girls during the terror attacks by Hamas and other armed groups in Israel on October 7, and the hostilities in Sudan where scores of women have reportedly been subjected to rape and other forms of sexual violence in the ongoing conflict. These, Guterres says, are heartbreaking and utterly unacceptable. He says despite women's full participation in making peace building much more effective, the number of women in decision-making roles is actually falling.
The facts are clear. Women lead to peace. Budgets and policies must follow, with ambitious targets for women's participation and urgent investments in women's peace building. Excellencies, dear friends, many women and girls are also facing a war on their fundamental rights at home and in their communities. Hard-fought progress is being reversed. Women's rights are fundamentally a question of power, and I see two deeply worrying trends.
One of these worrying trends Guterres mentions is the artificial intelligence technology dominated by men as leaders and at the technical level. He warns that when systems are designed by men, they result in biased algorithms.
Women's needs, women's bodies, and women's fundamental rights are ignored. Male-dominated algorithms could literally program inequalities into activities from urban planning to credit ratings to medical imaging for years to come. This endangers men and boys as well as women and girls.
The UN chief calls on governments, civil society, and the Silicon Valleys of the world to bridge the digital gender divide and ensure women have decision-making roles in digital technology at all levels. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, Senate leader Chuck Schumer calls for Israel to hold new elections. His remarks come amid increased pressure from President Joe Biden over the mounting death toll in the conflict sparked by the October 7 attacks by Hamas militants. Kimi Oria reports.
Senate leader Chuck Schumer suggests that Israel must hold a new election. This amid growing discontent among Democrats in Congress and increased pressure from President Joe Biden on the Netanyahu government over the mounting death toll in Gaza.
5 months into this conflict, it is clear that Israelis need to take stock of the situation and ask, must we change course? At this critical juncture, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel. At a time when so many Israelis have lost their confidence in the vision and direction of their government.
Schumer, the highest-ranking elected Jewish official in U.S. history, says that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu risks making the U.S. ally a pariah.
Israel cannot survive if it becomes a pariah. Prime Minister Netanyahu has also weakened Israel's political and moral fabric through his attempts to co-opt the judiciary. And he has shown zero interest in doing the courageous and visionary work required to pave the way for peace, even before this present conflict.
Meanwhile, Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell describes, in very sharp words, Schumer's call for a new election in Israel.
It is grotesque and hypocritical for Americans who hyperventilate about foreign interference in our own democracy to call for the removal of a democratically elected leader of Israel. This is unprecedented. We should not treat fellow democracies this way at all.
McConnell says Israel is not a colony of America, whose leaders serve at the pleasure of the party in power in Washington. Only Israel's citizens, McConnell says, should have a say on who runs their government, as this is the very definition of democracy and sovereignty. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller says Schumer's remarks are his alone and not a statement from the White House.
Congress is an independent branch of government. I think the government of Israel understands quite well how the U.S. government works. They interact frequently, not just with members of the executive branch, but with members of Congress, including Senator Schumer, who has traveled to Israel a number of times over the years. And I'm sure that they fully understand that he speaks for himself. He's obviously someone we're in close contact with, but it's not a statement from the executive branch.
Kimi Oria for Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
In other news, the House of Representatives approves a bill that would force TikTok to divest from its Chinese owner. This, or be banned from the country. Danica Lee has the details.
The legislation known officially as the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act is a major setback for the video sharing app TikTok. TikTok surged in popularity across the world. It has, however, caused nervousness about its Chinese ownership and its potential subservience to the Communist Party in Beijing. In a rare moment of unity, the U.S. House votes 352 in favor of the proposed law and 65 against. The fate of the bill is uncertain in the more cautious U.S. Senate, where some are apprehensive of making a drastic move against an app that has 170 million users in the country. The White House says President Joe Biden will sign the bill into law if it comes to his desk. Danica Lee, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Let's now head over to Canada, where its most populous city is celebrating its 190th year. Let's find out from Chantel Santos how Toronto is commemorating its anniversary.
This month, Toronto is celebrating its 190 years of establishment as an official city. It was the first incorporated city in Ontario. The name Toronto is a term originating from the Iroquois, which means where there are trees and water. When it was incorporated as a new city in 1834, Toronto only had a population of over 9,000. As of July 2022, the city of Toronto is now home to more than 3 million people, making it the most populated city in Canada. The city has changed and grown in population, geography, architecture, art, landscapes, and culture throughout its almost 200 years of existence. This year, celebrations have been held across the city to honor the city's anniversary. Curated live music, art galleries, pop-up shows, Toronto-made markets, and fireworks show were put up for all Torontonians to enjoy and participate in, honoring the city's diversity. Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow notes that before Toronto became known as the diverse and thriving city that it is now, that it has been home to many First Nations and Indigenous peoples of Canada. Chantal Santos, Toronto, Ontario, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Back here in the U.S., officials in several Texas counties have issued disaster declarations ahead of the total solar eclipse. This in anticipation of extremely large crowds, increased traffic, and enormous strains on first responders, hospitals, and roads on the days leading up to, on, and after the day of the astronomical event. Jane Kathleen Gregorio tells us more.
Less than 3 weeks remain until the much-anticipated solar eclipse will cut a path of totality across North America. Texas is among the 15 states where the total eclipse will have the longest duration, making the Lone Star State a prime viewing destination. On April 8th, the moon will block the sun for a few minutes, plunging millions into darkness during the early afternoon. This rare event is expected to draw thousands to the Texas Hill Country to get an optimum view. Meanwhile, Texas officials have expressed concerns about the enormous strain on public safety resources, prompting several county judges to issue disaster declarations ahead of the eclipse. These counties include Bell, Hill, Kendall, Kerr, and Travis, to name a few.
I entered a disaster declaration today to help emergency responders better prepare for all the people who are coming to Travis County to watch this once-in-a-lifetime event. What that disaster declaration requires you to do is if you're having a party, an event, a gathering of 50 people or more at your property in unincorporated Travis County, you need to go to traviscountytx.gov/total solar eclipse and register with the Travis County Fire Marshal's office. This is going to let us know where we need more help and more emergency responders and help us keep the roads open and safe so that everybody can have a great time here in Travis County.
I would also like to share with you that the county has made the decision to close our offices on April 8th. The reason we're doing this is to encourage our 1,200 plus employees to stay home on that day. As I've mentioned, we're anticipating the roads and highways to be very congested, so staying home and enjoying the eclipse from your yard or porch will be your best and your safest option. Many other entities and most of the school districts are also going to be closed on that day. So please, if you have to buy groceries, if you have to put gas in your car, or you have to run errands, do all of that in the days before the April 8th weekend. I can assure you will be glad that you did.
Stay tuned for further updates.
In Corpus Christi, Texas, I'm Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Extraordinary stories from Thomas I. Likeness today. From Europe in danger of catastrophic consequences of climate change, to the Caribbean Sea swallowing Cartagena, to Australia's Birdman flying contest. All these and more on Correspondent at Large.
And now, news and commentary from around the globe. There's an old saying that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Looking at a report on climate risks, it appears Europe might be falling into that category. A new EU analysis warns that Europe could suffer catastrophic consequences from climate change if it fails to take urgent and decisive action to adapt to risks. Scenes like these from last year are still fresh in a lot of people's minds. And of course, there's the recent flooding in France from extreme weather. Climate risk expert Hans-Martin Fussel says governments have paid attention to some of the risks.
However, implementing effective actions may have been hampered by things such as competing priorities, unclear risk ownership, or insufficient investment funds.
The European Environment Agency says the dangers include fires, water shortages and their effects on agricultural production, flooding, erosion, and saltwater intrusion. The agency adds, many of these risks have already reached critical levels. Shades of Atlantis. You recall the fictional lost island mentioned in Plato's works? It sank in the Atlantic Ocean. A Colombian city is facing a similar fate. The waters of the Caribbean Sea are slowly swallowing the port city of Cartagena. It's located in northern Colombia. Cartagena is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a colonial-era city. It was once a hotspot of conflict between European powers vying for control of what was then the New World. Today, it's a major tourist destination. But experts say it could find itself almost a meter underwater by the end of the century. Researchers say since the beginning of this century, during the last 24 years, the sea level in Cartagena has risen by about 7 millimeters a year. Now that's more than twice the global average of about 3 millimeters. Flooding has become commonplace. To protect the city, machines are hard at work building 4.5 kilometers of seawall to protect it from encroaching waters. Over the decades, the sea has destroyed 250 homes in the community, the health center, docks, and several community halls. And from the frivolous file of world records, we go to Cambodia. About a week ago, hundreds of Cambodians braved sticky tropical heat to set an unusual new world record for the most people performing a bridal carry at the same time. Here you see it, 245 men hoisting their partners, wives, girlfriends, sisters, or mothers, with one arm under the legs and one behind the back. Now, they held that position for 1 minute to set the mark certified by the Guinness World Records representatives. The event drew participants, both young and old. 50-year-old mother Heng Poi says she was so excited to take part, her son carried her. After setting the record, many of the participants carried on with the hold as part of a competition to win a new car. The bridal carry is so named for the way a groom in some cultures carries his bride over the threshold of their new home. Still with the frivolous, every year I follow the Birdman flying contest in Melbourne, Australia. Let's see what this year's entries looked like. Now the object is to see who can fly the furthest in their homemade, human-powered aircraft before plunging into the Yarra River. And the loudest applause seems to go to those who made the most spectacular flops. Contestant Christopher Ellis launched himself off the platform with his do-it-yourself craft.
Made out of bamboo taken from my backyard and some greaseproof paper and PVC glue.
Adrian Chan had high hopes as he waited to take off in his homemade contraption.
Yeah, it's gonna fly like an eel, so I'm hoping it's not gonna flop like a chicken.
And here he goes. Scott Pollard with his giant eagle takes to the air.
I mean, I'm a fat guy jumping off a pier with an 8-meter wide eagle. Something could definitely go wrong.
Contestants raise money that's given to various charities. I'll be back in 7 days, and in the meantime, with my feet firmly planted on the ground, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness in the ensuing week. Thomas I. Likeness, Correspondent at Large, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
The World Health Organization and the United Nations Children's Fund collaborate in offering a new and free online course designed to safeguard children's health. This, as the challenges posed by environmental pollution and climate change increase day after day. Jeff Senidad on Health as Well.
The free online course aims to equip healthcare providers with practical knowledge and resources. This to recognize and mitigate effectively the risk of pollution and climate change that jeopardize children's health. This collaborative course by WHO and UNICEF provides an in-depth exploration of children's environmental health. It covers topics of global concern including air pollution, climate change, e-waste, lead, pesticides, and other hazards affecting children's well-being. Participants will gain valuable insights and practical strategies to enhance their capacity in this critical area of healthcare. The course addresses the health sector's pressing need, where many providers have limited knowledge to recognize, assess, and manage environment-related disease in children. Through tailored training materials and resources, healthcare professionals will be equipped to better address these challenges in their local context. UNICEF and WHO affirm that every child has the fundamental right to grow up in a safe and healthy environment. Jeff Senidad, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Papua New Guinea and Australia introduced the Climate Finance Initiative for Resilience and Sustainable Transition, or Climate First. This under the two countries' partnership. Echo Ortoleza Canyola reports on Oceania at a Glance.
National Capital District Governor Poe Sparkup, with Australian High Commissioner to Papua New Guinea John Feeks, lead the launch of Climate First at the APEC House Port Moresby. The 20 million Australian dollar, or over 50 million kina funding, aims to scale up access to climate finance and to extend support in other provinces and communities in the country over the next 4 years. Global Green Growth Institute will implement Climate First under Director General Dr. Frank Ridge Birdman.
For this project, the target is that in the next 4 years, we will bring $400 million. So using that same target of 20 times. Australia First is $20 million, and we aim to bring $400 million to PNG. That would be a good part of all the climate finance that the government is aiming to get.
The program will be delivered in partnership with Papua New Guinea's Climate Change and Development Authority, with Managing Director Deborah Sungi.
We've already done quite a bit of preparatory work, so we work with the central bank, and one of the ways to get money is through issuing green bonds, for instance. And PNG has already prepared its green bonds framework, so the government needs to do that homework, if you like, get the framework in place, and then we can work with the central bank or with other banks to bring in that money.
The project is set to mobilize and secure international and domestic climate financing and investments to fund projects on climate adaptation and mitigation for Papua New Guinea.
I am confident that Climate First is another forward step that will strengthen our bilateral ties and enhance the future security, sustainability, and prosperity of our country.
From Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, Eko Hortaleza Quinola, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
And as always, before we let you go, here's our photo of the week. This is a photo of the Ferris wheel at the National Harbor in Maryland, as the northeastern region gets ready for spring. Thank you all for joining us again. If there are stories you want us to share with you, just comment below. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at Eagle News Live. I'm David Oria. We live in extraordinary times. Stay happy and healthy, everyone.